Welcome back to Clarkston Lighthouse Guidance. I'm your host today, Chandler Fleming.
I'm Victoria Fleming, and we are the owners of Clarkston Lighthouse Counseling. And today we are going to talk about Love Me, Darn It.
Yes.
Love Me, Darn It. What's that about, Chandler?
I think it's going to be a topic of a book one day. I was actually sharing this with a client of mine, and she said, you got to write the book. So we know that most couples fight. Really, all couples fight to some degree or another. But what do couples fight about? There's a lot of research on that.
There are a lot of topics people can fight about for sure. And some of those would be maybe money and chores and expectations, in-laws, outlaws.
Oh, sure. So there's a whole list of things about fighting. And one of the things that we need to remember is that in that fighting, that conflict, that the opposite of love is not hate, but really indifference. So when you see that conflict going on, that sometimes angry emotions, that hateful sort of thing, it's really not the opposite of loving. It's really just a fight for the relationship. And what I have found with couples in marital therapy, when they come in, the couple that is mainly indifferent towards one another, they are the most difficult one to kind of repair the relationship.
And I think that's an interesting concept. I don't think people understand that the opposite of love is not hate, but that it is indifference, because indifference is, I don't care what happens to you anymore. Whereas hate, there's still a vigorous energy, there's still a passionate energy that's involved, so that there's still a connection.
Sure.
So what we're looking at with that love me, darn it, is the fact that there is tension that results in a fight over unmet expectations. Or, I know we've talked about before, that is primarily two key reasons that people fight.
Sure, and I think they fight because most people fight underlying cause of they're looking for love. They're looking for love or respect.
So that would be one, love. Yeah, love or respect would be the two.
For sure. And so sometimes the messages that are sent are poor attempts to gain love or respect. Frequently a partner may say something like, you work too much. And what they mean is, I miss you. Or they'll say, hey, why don't you just go hunting? But they mean just the opposite, that they want to interact with that person. They want to spend time together. And there's a lot of times messages that sound very contrary to what the person wants comes out.
Because I can just hear that tone. Oh, just go ahead and go hunting.
Sure.
And so the husband could easily, or the wife, whoever the hunter is, could easily be like, fine, I will. And the message was misunderstood because that's not really the intent. It's that love me, darn it, that we're looking at.
Right.
So it's a struggle for please love me.
And I think most of us have this deep need to want to be loved, to want to be cared for. So a lot of people ask me, well, why don't people just come right out and ask? Why don't they just ask for love more directly? And there's some reasons behind that. The first thing that I'd like to talk about why people don't just ask directly for love is the category that I call surprise birthday parties.
Right.
And how surprise birthday parties goes is, if I really want a surprise birthday party, it's hard to get one. Because if I hint, I might be too subtle and those clues might be lost. If I come right out and ask for it, is it really a surprise? So there are desires that people have, and they want those desires to be met. But it doesn't mean the same thing if you ask for it. If you say to somebody, please tell me I'm beautiful, and they say, oh, you're very beautiful. It's like, are they saying that because I asked them to, or because they really think that? So it gets conflictual. So a lot of times, people want to get that need met in the best way possible. They'll drop hints, but they won't come right out and ask for it.
Right. So that parallel with the surprise birthday party is, like you said, I may drop some hints and be like, gee, my birthday's coming up, and gee, it'd be fun to get some people together. But if you don't pick up on it and I don't get that surprise party, and the same is true with that love message of, are you sure you have to go hunting, is really, gosh, I wish you'd stay home with me.
Yeah.
And so it's the subtlety of those messages that we want people to recognize, that love me, darn it, is a mixed message that can be a confusing message, but that's what we inadvertently do.
Sure. And I think a lot of times when you get worked up yourself in a relationship, you have to ask, what is it that I really want? And a lot of times it's, I want to feel valued. I want to feel loved. And that's pretty important.
So in that dance of trying to get needs met, of being loved, of being respected, we end up focusing on some of those topics of money. We end up looking at those topics of chores, kind of explain what those layers are. You know, because we made the list, but then we said the underlying is really love and respect. So what does that look like?
Well, I think it translates something as simple as chores. If my spouse really loved me, I wouldn't have to ask them to do the chores. They would just do the dishes. Or I've asked so many times that my spouse would clean up her dirty dishes, and she doesn't do it. That must mean that she doesn't care about me, because how hard is it to pick up her dirty dishes?
Or those socks land right next to the laundry
you wouldn't let me slip
basket,
that
but
her
not
in there, right?
quite into the laundry basket. And I think, seriously, really, you can't get them in.
Sure.
And so that's conveyed as disrespect, or a, gosh, if he only loved me enough, he would make that extra effort to walk that extra foot to actually get the socks into the laundry basket instead of beside the laundry basket. Just saying, not an issue in our home.
Sure.
Because we don't fight.
I listen, you fight. So let's get that straight.
Yeah. So really, those plays of, but would that even be true for money? You know, money, is that also within that love and respect?
A lot of times it is, because why don't they respect my decision? Why don't they respect our future and my sense of safety? Or why don't they spend money on me? Why do they put us in such a bad situation?
Or we've talked about this budget, and we've talked about this budget,
Sure.
and why won't this person respect and yield to
Or
the
the
fact
opposite,
that we're...
why do they constantly hound me over money? You know, is money really that important? Again, most of the time, what's under those issues is that sense of, hey, I want to feel loved and I want to be respected.
So are love and respect just opposite sides of the same coin, or does one tend to be more true of one gender than the other?
You know, I think that women tend to be more focused on the love side of the coin, and men tend to be more focused on the respect side. And the example I used in the past was I had a supervisor who was a guy, and he said, you know, everybody at work hates me. They think I'm a mean person, but you know what? They respect me, and they know that I get things done. And he was very proud of that. And I thought of a female coworker or another female supervisor. She may not feel that same way. She may feel like, okay, my workers respect me, but they don't like me, and that might bother them. And I think that stereotype translates to a lot of relationships where men are more comfortable not being liked, but being respected, that they have power, that they have decisions, that they have wisdom. And women tend to be more relational, so it's I want to be liked on a relationship level also. So there can be those gender differences.
Okay, so let's go back to how a person doesn't want to flat out say, throw me a surprise birthday party, okay? Because
Sure.
then, like you said, it's not a surprise. And you said the same is true of asking for love. You know, please just love me. Please do what I'm asking. Why is that? Why are people afraid just to say, just love me?
Well, one of them is the surprise birthday party, but the second one would be fear of rejection. Most people, no matter how long they've been together, are afraid of being hurt. And love is vulnerable. The more we love, the more that person can hurt us and cause pain in our lives. And we do disappoint each other. We're not good at reading people's minds. As much as we want the other person to be our everything, they really can't. Their imperfections get away, or our imperfections get in the way. So fear causes people to kind of hold back. You know, I've mentioned to a couple of clients recently, you know, people don't even love God completely. They hold back a little bit. So if they have a concept of a perfect God, they still can't let go of themselves enough to fully risk even a perfect love.
So it's interesting. It's a dance of closeness and yet distance, because we're so wanting that connection. We're so wanting that embrace of love, but on the other hand, we're afraid.
Yeah.
And like you said, it doesn't necessarily matter the length of the relationship. And so there's a tension, an underlying tension of, I don't want to have to ask for the love, but I'm really disappointed when I don't get it. I don't want to have to ask for the birthday party, but I'm going to be majorly disappointed if I don't get it. So how do we balance? Sounds a little bit like a tightrope. How do couples learn to balance that?
Yeah, I think it's quite difficult. I think it's important to learn to ask for what we want, but recognize the other person can't totally meet those needs. We also need to recognize that part of the reason why people don't just flat out ask for love is that relationships a lot of times are still a game of tag. Even long-term relationships can be a game of tag. We want to be chased, but a lot of times we don't want to be the chaser. It's a lot of fun and satisfying catching the other person, but it's not as much fun catching them if it's too easy or too hard. And I want to talk a little bit about that. In relationships, that tension still exists, in that oftentimes if there's not some tension there, if you have a spouse who always says, I don't care, whatever you want, I don't care, whatever you want, that can be a major turnoff. That it sounds nice at beginning and that they seem to be kind and considerate and so forth, but it seems kind of wimpy, especially when a guy constantly says, I don't care, what do you want? So people crave this partnership, this equality in relationships, even though it's difficult to achieve. So when you chase somebody and it's too easy, it loses its fun, but also if it's too difficult, it loses its fun.
Right, and I appreciate that immediately. I could picture being on a playground as a kid, playing tag. I can remember in the summers of my youth, hours spent playing kick the can, just a version of tag, and how incredibly fun it was. And I know that when you and I, after a few years of marriage, we said, gosh, what is it that we miss? And do you remember what we said? What was it that we missed the most?
Really the attention from flirting, or the attention of the game.
Which is tag.
Yeah.
Really that whole, so we want to keep that within our relationships for sure. So there becomes that learning how to communicate, I want the party, I want the love, and yet also feeling like there is some chasing.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's what we want to look at very much in this, so that couples don't have to be saying, love me, darn it.
Sure.
That it can just become a more authentic love me.
Sure.
And so let's look at, how do we turn the corner from the stress of kind of a tug of war, love me the way I want to be loved, to let's communicate and love well?
Well, I think you have to learn to listen for meaning and ask more directly for what we want. And then sometimes we have to settle for the next best thing. You know what? A non-surprise birthday party is better than no party at all. And that's really, really important to really think about and focus on what is the next best thing. Some of us in the areas of love and even in the areas of sex, we want the other person to strongly initiate what's going on. I had a client one time that said, things are not going really good between me and my wife, and there's a lot of tension there. And so we talked about the previous night, and he said that it was interesting that he gave her a back rub, and she took her shirt off, and nothing really happened. They both went to sleep, and they both went to sleep thinking, what happened here? We thought more was going to take place. And it was really this, what was initiating a relationship, what was initiating time together. So it's really important to be able to just identify, hey, in our relationship, what is initiating, and kind of sort that out in your relationship. So a lot of times, especially in the areas of sex, couples think that one or both of them are initiating, and it totally gets lost. So we have to learn to ask more directly for what we want. We also have to learn to ask, please tell me you love me. Please hold my hand. Please spend time with me.
It's sounding kind of complicated in a way, because it's so sad to think. I can just perfectly see a cartoon of a man and a woman, their backs to each other, arms folded, utterly frustrated, because
Right.
as you said, he thinks, I'm initiating, I'm rubbing her back. She thinks, I'm initiating, I took off my shirt. But neither one of them clearly articulated. And so rather than follow through and clearly articulate, they go to bed angry.
Right.
And again, that's that whole tension of love me, darn it. And so let's take that couple.
Sure.
What could have been different?
Well, it's interesting because directness sometimes doesn't work either. So if somebody says, hey, let's go spend time together, oftentimes that's not romantic enough, and it's too direct. So what works well is kind of, a varying degree of subtlety. and starting small and building up from that. Gottman talks about bidding, and it's really letting out a series of smaller and progressive clues to what you want. So it may start out with a back rub and then a shoulder rub and working your way down. So it becomes more and more clear, but it doesn't start out with more direct touch. It starts out with more indirect touch.
And as we're talking, I'm thinking, and no wonder relationships are complicated.
Sure.
Because I'm like, whoa, because like you said, if I just come right out and say, hey, I miss you. You're at work all the time. My tone, if it's right, could come across, but far too often it'll be like, you work all the time, and then I've lost you.
Yep.
So it's a dance. And so when very often you'll hear us refer to relationships as a dance. And for anyone who's done any kind of dancing at all, you know that there's that stepping on of toes, and there's that learning how to work with your partner. And the same is true when we're communicating. What would be some other examples where the bidding is going on,
Yeah, I think it's really bidding for time in developing trade-offs. Hey, can we go to a movie today? Well, I've got a lot of housework. Well, possibly, she could help them out and do some housework, and they could go to a movie. Sorry, I like to play on gender roles, but anyways, maybe she could help him out and do some more housework.
That would be wonderful, honey.
Yeah.
I would love if you want to vacuum, and then we'll have time. What is this saying that many hands make light work?
Yeah.
So that would be perfect.
But it's really developing those healthy trade-offs. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, and that's hugely important. Just some overall conclusions. Most people fight, and they really do fight over love. So it's important when you're in a fight with your partner to really ask yourself, what is it that I want? What would make this situation? What am I fighting for? And recognizing that fighting can be good. It keeps the relationship alive and reestablishes power and respect for each other. And a partnership oftentimes takes place for fighting, if you're fighting for the right ways, in the right ways, and for the right reasons. But just ask yourself, what would make this better? And that's hugely important, to really look and ask those tough questions. It's also important to recognize that we all have this fear of rejection, that no matter how long we've been together, we have a fear of rejection, or really hope of what I call spontaneous love. And love is sometimes spontaneous, but a lot of times love takes a lot of planning. And then learning to be more direct. And in that being more direct, it's being progressive. It's not starting out with the bottom line, but it's getting more and more firm. And then really being able to say, hey, what is the next best thing? You know what? I want to be met at the door by my spouse to engage in married activity. So that may not happen, but what's the next best thing after that? Coming home and initiating something. And then really in your relationship, a conversation about what is initiating love, what is initiating sex, and how do you guys know when the other one's initiating, what do you expect in initiation, are some really, really huge ways to improve your relationship.
And I appreciate what you said, that fighting can be good. I think we have a concept that all fighting is bad. But as we said earlier, indifference is the greatest enemy to a relationship. When I no longer care that you're coming home late from work, when I no longer care if we're going out on dates, when I no longer am invested in any way, then our relationship is in great peril. But as long as there's some energy being expended, even if it's in a fight, then there's energy to work on the relationship.
Yes.
And so I guess one of the things I would say is, if your spouse is saying, if your partner is saying, love me, darn it, maybe take a step back and say, why?
Yep.
Why is he saying, love me, darn it?
And you got to recognize that it's a love me, darn it. And love me, darn it's very rarely start off sounding like love me. They sound more, we often hear the darn it part. You're always gone. You're always at work. You're too busy. And really the translation for most people, that gut emotion is, I miss you. I want you to care about me. I want you to spend time with me. And that message totally gets lost.
So as we're looking at that love me darn it concept, just recognize the next time you're in a fight with your spouse that it could be that it's been misunderstood. The tone may have been wrong. The message may have even been wrong.
Oh, sure, bad delivery.
But if we can just learn to say, gosh, what's really going on here? Gosh, I have been working a lot of hours this week and we've not had any time together. And the reality is, for a healthy relationship, there should be dates. There should be ongoing dates, even if it's as simple as watching MASH on the sofa.
Right.
You know, every single night, you know, that's our downtime. We've got that 30 minutes together. There does need to be dialogue on a regular basis. On some days, it may be for 2 minutes, others 20, some 2 hours. But let's be careful as couples that we don't neglect those key components so that it even has to get to the point of love me, darn it.
Yep. Thank you very much. If you have any questions that you can send, please email them or put them on our Facebook page. And we really appreciate the fact that those people who have sent in some questions, we would be glad to answer your questions on the air. Have a great day.
Thank you.
The views expressed in this show are for general educational purposes only and do not constitute professional advice on any subject matter, nor do they necessarily reflect the views or opinions of its guests or of Independence Television. If mental health assistance is needed, please seek professional licensed treatment.